Welcome to our channel. Today, we embark on a fascinating journey into the architecture of the human mind to understand why silence is often a sign of profound cognitive activity. In a world that ceaselessly celebrates the loud, the quick-witted, and the immediate responders, we often overlook the power of the pause. We are investigating the scientific correlation between verbal economy and cognitive depth. It is a common misconception that those who speak less have less to say. Science, however, suggests that silence is not an absence of thought, but rather a symptom of heavy internal processing. We will uncover how distinct neural pathways influence the way we communicate and why a quiet demeanor often hides a loud mind.
It is wonderful to be here to discuss this, Jane. As a psychologist, I frequently encounter individuals who feel inadequate because they cannot think on their feet as quickly as their peers. They often describe a sense of internal congestion, where thoughts are rich and complex but struggle to reach the surface instantly. We must understand that the human brain does not have a singular setting for processing information. For the contemplative type, often overlapping with introversion, the mind works like a deep-sea diver rather than a jet skier. They are exploring the depths, checking the pressure, and observing the environment, whereas the rapid speaker is skimming the surface. The delay in speech is not emptiness, it is the weight of depth.
That analogy of the diver versus the jet skier is perfect for visualizing the biological reality. To understand this scientifically, we have to look at the neurochemical foundation of our personalities. The primary distinction between those who speak to think and those who think to speak lies in how their brains manage neurotransmitters, specifically dopamine and acetylcholine. Extroverts, or rapid processors, generally have a higher tolerance for dopamine. They require more external stimulation, like talking, social interaction, and sensory input, to feel a reward buzz. This drive pushes them to vocalize thoughts immediately to get that hit of adrenaline and dopamine, creating a feedback loop of rapid speech and reaction.
Precisely. And in contrast, the deep thinker or the introvert has a much lower threshold for dopamine stimulation. Too much external noise or rapid-fire conversation can actually cause them to feel overstimulated and exhausted. Instead, their brains rely more heavily on acetylcholine. This is a neurotransmitter linked to the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode. Acetylcholine makes us feel good when we turn inward, focus intently, or engage in deep solitary thought. So the person who speaks less is actually bathing in a chemical reward system that prizes silence and reflection. They aren't speaking because their brain is rewarding them for holding the thought and examining it internally first.
This difference in neurotransmitters actually dictates the physical pathway that information travels through the brain. This is where the hard science becomes incredibly validating for quiet people. Research indicates that information in the brain of an extrovert, or a reactive speaker, travels a physically shorter path. It moves primarily through the areas responsible for sensory processing and motor execution. It is a see-react, or hear-speak loop. It is efficient, certainly, but it bypasses the deeper analytical centers. This explains why some people can talk for minutes without truly saying anything of substance. Their pathway prioritizes output over processing.
And this is where the magic of the quiet mind reveals itself. For those who speak less, the information travels a significantly longer, more winding road called the cholinergic pathway. When a quiet person receives a question or an idea, that input doesn't just go to the mouth. It travels first through the reticular activating system, then to the cerebral cortex for complex planning. It visits the hypothalamus for temperature and regulation, and crucially, it stops at the hippocampus and the amygdala. This is a tour of the brain's emotional center and its long-term memory archive. The delay you hear in their speech is the travel time of this journey.
Let's break down the implications of that stopover at the hippocampus. The hippocampus is essentially the library of the brain. It is where we store personal experiences and factual knowledge. When a deep thinker is silent after being asked a question, their brain is literally cross-referencing the new information with everything they have ever learned or experienced. They are not just reacting to the moment, they are contextualizing the moment against their entire history. This is why when they finally do speak, the answer is often comprehensive and insightful. They have performed a database query, while the rest of the room was just reacting to the surface data.
That is a beautiful way to put it. And we cannot ignore the amygdala's role in this long pathway. The amygdala handles emotional processing. By routing thoughts through the center, the quiet thinker is assessing the emotional weight and potential impact of their words before they are spoken. This is the mechanism of empathy and tact. While the reactive speaker might blurt out something regretful, the deliberative thinker is simulating the social outcome of their sentence. This emotional quality control takes time. The silence is an active filter, removing impurities and unnecessary conflict from the message before it is broadcast to the world.
It is fascinating to realize that this latency, which is often penalized in corporate meetings or classrooms, is actually a sign of superior cognitive hygiene. There is also the aspect of the prefrontal cortex. Studies using fMRI scans have shown that people who score higher on introversion scales often have thicker gray matter in the prefrontal cortex. This is the area of the brain responsible for abstract thought and decision-making. So biologically, their hardware is upgraded for complex problem solving, but that software takes longer to boot up. It creates a trade-off. You lose speed, but you gain significant accuracy and depth in the final output.
Exactly. We often call this deliberative thinking. In my practice, I try to reframe this for clients. I tell them that their brain is set up for quality over quantity. The metabolic cost of this type of thinking is high. It consumes a great deal of glucose and energy to run a thought through the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex simultaneously. This is why deep thinkers often tire easily in high-stimulus environments. They aren't just hanging out. Their brains are running a marathon of cross-referencing and emotional simulation with every single interaction. Their silence is often a necessary energy conservation strategy.
That explains the introvert hangover perfectly. I want to touch on the listening aspect as well, because the quiet person isn't using their mental energy to formulate their next sentence while the other person is still talking. They are often engaging in true active listening. Their neural pathways are fully open to incoming data. Science shows that when we prepare to speak, our auditory cortex actually suppresses its activity. We literally hear less because we are getting ready to talk. People who speak less don't trigger this suppression mechanism as often. They capture more data points from the conversation than the loud participants do.
That is a critical distinction. The quiet person is absorbing tone, body language, and subtext. They are reading between the lines. This is why when they do offer a solution, it often addresses the root cause of a problem rather than just the symptoms. They have processed the entire picture. However, this creates a social paradox. In Western culture specifically, we have what Susan Cain calls the extrovert ideal. We equate confidence with volume and leadership with speed. The quiet thinker is often misjudged as aloof, unintelligent, or disengaged, simply because their processing speed is calibrated for depth rather than velocity.
It is a cultural bias that ignores biological reality. We are seeing a shift, though, especially in the tech and scientific sectors, where deep work is becoming a valued currency. Cal Newport's concept of deep work aligns perfectly with the neurobiology we are discussing. The ability to hold a thought for a long duration without vocalizing it is a prerequisite for solving complex mathematical or engineering problems. If you are constantly discharging your cognitive load through speech, you disrupt the consolidation of long-term memory and complex pattern recognition. Silence is the incubator for innovation.
Yes, the incubator metaphor is apt. Think of the brain as a pressure cooker. If you leave the valve open, which is constant speech, the pressure never builds. You get steam, but you don't cook the food. The quiet person keeps the valve closed. They let the pressure of the idea build. They let the heat rise. And the result is a fully formed concept. For the listeners who feel pressured to speak up more, I want to validate your nature. Your silence is not a defect, it is a container. It is a necessary boundary that allows your thoughts to mature before they are exposed to the air.
Let's discuss the downside, or rather the challenge of this neural wiring, the analysis paralysis. Because the pathway is so long and visits so many centers of the brain, a person can sometimes get stuck in the loop. The amygdala might flag a potential risk, the hippocampus might recall a past failure, and the prefrontal cortex might see 5 different outcomes. This can lead to a total blockage where nothing is said at all. It is the double-edged sword of deep thinking. The key is to trust the process, but also recognize when the internal review board is being too strict.
That is a very real struggle. The internal review board. I like that. We have to learn that not every thought needs to pass through the Supreme Court of the mind before being spoken. However, generally speaking, the regret of silence is usually less than the regret of careless speech. The quiet person rarely has to apologize for an insensitive remark or a factual error made in haste. Their words are vetted. This builds a different kind of authority. It is an authority based on reliability. When a person who rarely speaks finally raises their hand, the room usually goes quiet. People know that if they are spending the energy to talk, it matters.
So, we have established that people who speak less rely on the cholinergic pathway, prioritize accuracy over speed, and utilize a rest and digest neurotransmitter system. This has evolutionary benefits. In a hunter-gatherer context, you needed the reactive members to spot the lion and run. But you also needed the deliberative members to track the migration patterns, remember the location of water sources from 10 years ago, and plan the winter storage. Both cognitive styles are necessary for survival, yet we have built a modern world that is tailored almost exclusively to the fast reaction style.
And that is why understanding this science is an act of self-compassion for many. If you are a deep thinker, you cannot simply force yourself to be a rapid responder without incurring significant stress and anxiety. You are fighting your own biology. Instead, play to your strengths. If you are in a meeting, say, "I need to process this. I will send you my thoughts by email later." That allows you to use your long neural pathway to its full potential. You are shifting the battlefield to terrain where you have the advantage, the terrain of reflection and written synthesis.
That is excellent practical advice. And for those of us who are naturally quick speakers, the science suggests we need to practice holding space. When we ask a quiet person a question, we must resist the urge to fill the silence after 3 seconds. That silence is not a disconnect. It is the data processing time. If we interrupt, we reset their cognitive clock to 0. By waiting, by allowing that uncomfortable pause to stretch to 10 or 20 seconds, we invite the deeper wisdom to surface. We essentially allow the download to complete.
Silence is a form of speech. It is a canvas upon which the deepest thoughts are painted. To our listeners who have spent their lives feeling too quiet or too slow, remember that your brain is simply built for deep sea exploration. You are designed to find the treasures that lie on the ocean floor, while others sail the surface. Value your silence, protect your processing time, and know that your depth is a gift. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the mind. We hope you find comfort in your